Hi, Jay Andrews here with Laguna Tools. Today I'm going to do an installation of the mobility kit on the Revo 1524 lathe. I've already removed the headstock and tailstock and slid those off and put them on the bench and on the floor over here. And I've got the lathe bed flipped upside down so that I can install it. I find that this is the easiest way to do it. If you have an existing lathe that's already been in service and you're installing this mobility kit after the fact, I think it's a little easier to slide those off. You can also do it when it's on the floor, but you have to reach up underneath to get the bolts in. I find that's a little more difficult to do. There are two ways to do it. I think this is a little bit easier. Let me show you how to install it. I've got the mobility kit brand new in the box. You'll see all the components are in the styrofoam. You'll want to lift these out, unwrap them, and be prepared to install. Start with 2 of the 3-inch bolts and insert them through the 2 holes at what is now the top of the leg. This will be the bottom when we flip it upside down. Guide those through. Make sure you've got a washer on the Allen head end. Carefully feed those through, leaving the threads exposed toward the short end of the lathe. We'll repeat the process on the other leg. There are 4 slide brackets that now bolt in with these bolts that we've just installed. And there's 4 holes on the bottom. We've got 2 bolts and 4 holes, so you need to make sure that the orientation is correct. When this piece is installed on this leg, I'm going to use the upper hole and the 3rd hole in this orientation. And then when I install the other bracket on the opposite side, it'll use the hole that'll be now on the top and the 3rd hole. Let's go ahead and install this one, and I'll just do it finger tight for right now. And repeat the process on the other leg. Now it's time to install the rear wheel bracket, and it looks just like this. There's no left or right, it can go on either way, but you do have to make a decision on which end of the lathe you want this on. You're going to have 2 wheels on one end and a swivel wheel on the opposite end, and just decide if you want the swivel wheel under the headstock or tailstock end. In my case, I'm going to have the fixed wheels under the headstock end. This slides right over the brackets, and I've left these bolts loose so that I can adjust this as necessary to get it on. When I install these bolts, I'll leave them loose so I can slide this from side to side as I get the wheels on. You'll take 2 of the 3-inch bolts. You're going to use 2 washers, one on the top, and that'll feed right through. Put another washer and then the nut. And we'll repeat the process on the other side here. 1 washer on top, 1 on the bottom. I'll leave these loose as well. Now that the bracket is on, you can adjust it to where it's centered. You can measure it if you want. Typically, I'll just eyeball those. And now there's 2 more bolts to put in. I'll install these bolts, and then finally I'll tighten everything down with a wrench and an Allen wrench. And finally, tighten down the 4 bolts on the outside edge. I'm going to locate the rear wheel assembly, and this is going to bolt onto the bracket that we just installed. There's 2 bolts. The short bolts are about 3/4 inches long with a big washer. I'll preload one side of those into the holes that are on the rear wheel bracket. It's easiest probably to put the washer on first and then to drop the bolt in. And then finally, line up the Allen wrench. These are slotted holes, by the way, so when you install this, leave it loose and then you can adjust it after it's on. I'll start with 1. I'll run the bolt in with the Allen wrench, but leave it loose so that I can pivot it. And then I'll bring the other one up. Once this is on, you can adjust it, and they have some play in these. I usually will bring these up, hold it in the up position, and finally tighten this with the Allen key. If you do need some adjustment, you can adjust it a little bit after the fact when it's on the floor and you have the other wheel on. While we're here at this point, it's a good idea to mention how heavy duty this bracket is. You don't want to put this on a traditional mobile base that isn't designed for lathes. You can see that these brackets are big, they're heavy, and they match the lathe weight itself. These lathes get heavy, and as you add weight to them for turning, you want a mobility kit that's matched to the lathe. So big heavy brackets, nice bronze bushings here at the wheels. It's a nice mobility kit. Now you're going to bring in and install the front wheel bracket. This normally points up, which in this case is down because the lathe is upside down. It'll install right onto the slide brackets like we did on the back side. And again, this will slide from side to side. Let's install the bolts. We'll leave them finger tight until we adjust it, and then finally we'll tighten them down. Next, I'm going to center it. You can measure it. Again, I just generally will eyeball it. Line it up. Now tighten the bolts down. Once these are tightened, tighten the 4 bolts from the outside. Now locate the swiveling front wheel assembly and the 4 bolts and washers that'll hold it on. The spring sometimes can be compressed or loose. We're going to tighten this up so that the spring is compressed, or what they call sandwiched in the manual. That'll get the wheel up and out of the way a little bit. This also leaves the wheel in the retracted position so that when you turn the lathe over, it's not going to roll away on you. The front wheel will bolt onto the outside edge of the lathe. I've got my Allen wrench and the 4 bolts right here. You can use the factory Allen wrench, or if you have one that's a T-handle that's a little bit longer, it makes it a little bit easier since you can come in from the outside and grab those bolts a little bit easier. I'll preload one of the bolts just to get it started on the machine, and then finally I'll finish up with the other 3. Once you have all 4 bolts started in here, you can position the bracket to where it's sort of leveled off, and then finally tighten it down. The front wheel is a retractable wheel, so it'll come down when you step on the pedal, and it'll retract when the wheel is in the up position. And when it's retracted, you'll want to have the lathe setting onto the leveling feet. You won't need the leveling feet on the opposite side, as the rear wheels will stay engaged with the ground all the time. But since the front wheel is retractable, we want to have the leveling feet in place. Put these in, tighten those down with a 14mm wrench. That really concludes the installation of the mobility kit for the lathe. You can find this mobility kit on our website under the Parts and Accessories tab. Just at the very top of the page, click on Parts and Accessories, click on Lathe, and you'll find this mobility kit there. If you have any questions, give our service staff a call at 800-234-1976.